From the 809 Restaurant and Lounge in the heart of Inwood, New York City, welcome to Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home in what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we welcome scenic designer and Inwood resident, Libby Stadstad. Libby Stadstad is a scenic designer for theater, opera, dance, film, and television, and immersive installations. Her work has been presented by New York City Center, Kennedy Center, Brooklyn Academy of Music, the Williamstown Theater Festival, and the Guggenheim Museum Works in Process series, among many others. In 2019, she made her debut with the highly acclaimed Alvin, Ailey American Dance Theater at New York City Center, featuring new choreography by Jamar Roberts. Stadstad's work has been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and she recently served as an adjunct professor of Scenic Design at Ramapo College. She is also a recipient of the Inwood Film Festival Filmmaker Fund Grant from Inwood Art Works, and we are thrilled to have her here today on our Artist Spotlight. So, Libby, welcome to Inwood Art Works On Air. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. How are you doing?
Good. Really good. I'm glad it's summer.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great to be maskless, right?
It is great to be maskless. Yeah, it feels almost a little odd that people can see my whole face. There's so much more expression that I'm suddenly aware of.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice.
Well,
yeah.
we're happy to have you maskless here. And I want to jump into your work if you don't mind.
Yeah.
By nature, scenic design is a collaborative job. Mm-hmm. With theater and film industry jobs nearly non-existent for the past year and a half, work has been scarce, would be an understatement, I think, to say. So how have you been able to navigate the pandemic?
Interesting. Yes. Well, through stop motion, which is really what brought me, I believe, here today. Like you said, work kind of dried up pretty quickly in March and April. I had one show that I was able to finish and submit for later, but I really had nothing else to do other than to dream, I guess. So me and actually my partner started playing around with some like stop motion, just like he was like, let's just do some simple, we'll just get some clay out, we'll just play around for like a day. And I was like, no, we're going armatures. And so like I always go like 0 to 100. So we just started playing with that, like getting wire. I did use clay on top of that. We started with there, and then trying to think of what else I've been animating with, playing with latex. And anyway, so I just started creating in my own apartment if I couldn't go outside.
So you created an entire studio for yourself, essentially.
Essentially, yeah. I had no studio. I was working only in other designers' studios before the pandemic. And now that the pandemic has been going for a year, I have all studio.
Well,
so
as I mentioned earlier, you're a recipient of the Filmmaker Fund Grant.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it's for your project that was tentatively titled, and I don't know if it's still titled, but I'm going to ask you now, Where the Rivers Meet.
Yes, it's still titled.
Okay, there you go. I'm glad it's sticking to it. And so tell us a little about where the inspiration of the project came from in this massive dreaming session you had post-pandemic or post-closing of the society here.
Well, I've always been fascinated with history, even from a young age. Everywhere that I've moved, I've found that it's important to understand kind of the culture you're stepping into and what's around you and help contextualize yourself in it. So even before the pandemic, that's kind of how I've entered into new communities, because I've lived not a ton of different places, but I've moved around. So it's interesting to me. And when I moved here, specifically into Inwood, I think one of the, I don't know how to say it, but like one of the special things about here, one of the things that we're really fortunate as a community to have is Cole Thompson and Don Rice, because I discovered their book and the massive amount of work they've done recording the history of the area. So I guess you could say that I'm lucky that I had the time to absorb even more of the research of the pandemic. And I was spending a lot of time in the park. So all of that kind of culminated into Where the Rivers Meet, which is based on the tulip tree that used to stand in the park.
Right. Mm-hmm. And your work is, I said, it's a stop motion piece, correct?
Yes.
So can you tell about the nature of Well, I guess the thing is like, I bet people are wondering, wait a second, Aaron, how does a scenic designer create her own film by herself in a pandemic? I mean, you wouldn't be out of line if you asked the question, but I want you to speak a bit about the stop motion process, because I don't think a lot of people know about how you've put your scenic design background to work to create your own little miniature studio for the project. So I think that's a piece I think you need to elaborate on just a little bit, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, yeah, I guess as a proof of concept, scenic designers usually make a model or a maquette to show how to provide to a director to show them how the scenery will shift, what things will look like, et cetera, et cetera. So I've been able to use those skills of, working with foam, paper, a lot of paper, with paper mostly, and printers, and so I've been able to use my skills for making miniature versions of things to just making miniature versions of an entire film, if that makes sense. It's not just the scenery, it's also the characters.
Yeah, and it's great to have that kind of control, right?
It's kind of fun, yeah. I was, you can either wait, sometimes you're like, as a scenic designer, you have to wait for a director or that person that you have this kind of symbiotic relationship with. This is kind of fun because I can just have that when I wake up in the morning. I can just create. And
tell us, where does the story begin? Does the story begin with the tulip tree, or does it predate the tulip tree?
It actually predates the tulip tree.
Okay.
It begins with, as I was reading more about, it's a very delicate subject, and it's something that I've become even more conscious of really while I was researching this, but land appropriation. So it does start with a nod to, I say this because it's all of our history because this is the land we share, but it's a Lenape creation myth that it starts with. It's a turtle. Like the creation myth is that the world grew off of a turtle's back, and I just thought that was a beautiful, beautiful image. So it starts with a tulip tree growing off of a turtle's back as it rises out of the ocean.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, this is where Manhattan was purchased.
Yes.
Which is also plays into the history, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's how the legend goes. And so this is exploring kind of the time before, the time during the purchase, and our time here in the land, and then also hopefully just like giving some hope for the future after we've left this space.
It's a wonderful idea because it really encapsulates humanity as a general observation of humanity, I think. And I said this earlier to someone else, is that our past is very much our present. And we get to choose how we move forward based off of what we do. So I think your film, without giving too much away about the history, and how you're interpreting this history, I think it'll be a great addition to the diaspora of art that supports our historical heritage here. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks.
Would you mind speaking a little bit how the Filmmaker Fund has helped, if it has at all, to help create the project?
Oh, first of all, thank you so much. It wouldn't exist without you and Inwood Art Works. So
thanks.
Yes, it has 100% helped. I would never have had the capital to explore this film the way I have, to set up, every time I've done stop motion, I've done it a different way. And this has allowed me to actually set up a proper studio space with like an overhead camera setup. It's given me the funds to buy the correct materials, and even to get the music that I really want. Usually I'm using public domain, and I've been able to make some stronger choices.
Rights issues are always hard to navigate at times. So public domain it's great when you're doing things, but it has to be the right fit for your project, though, right? So
Exactly.
That's part of it all. So, well, you're very welcome, and we can't wait. And that's part of it. We hope. And I asked the question genuinely. It wasn't about a pat on the back for us or anything else like that, because I'm always interested in hearing from the artist why we should keep doing it, or should we keep doing it? Do you know what I mean? Like I always question my motives of what I'm doing. It's like I always question is it landing? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it landing? Is it finding? Is it useful? Because that's what I need to hear. If it's like, well, it was nice, but it wasn't enough, really, because I needed to make X, Y, Z, and da. But the fact that you were able to feel comfortable in exploring this piece and creating what your vision is of it, that's really comforting, I think.
No, it's great, and it's even I obviously I tend to go straight towards like the the tactile things that it has provided, but also whether or not you knew it. One of the other filmmakers also reached out to me to help him with his project. I wasn't able to, unfortunately, but the point of it is that like I feel like that you're also creating connections, right, and keeping the community strong. So outside of the monetary value, I just see like a general community value of like bringing everyone together and bringing, you connected me and Don Rice. Like I know I don't need to go on and on, but I do feel like this is really important.
Well, thank you. We try and we keep trying to figure out new ways and going back to assimilate to what you're saying. What have we learned from our past that we could not repeat if we could afford to, or actually learn from that and our failures and constructively move them in a direction. And honestly, resources are tight, and it's great to see that this is meaningful. And so, thank you for that. And how I guess we should ask, just because we can. I know it's like a balance sheet. People are going to hear this at a different time than we're recording it. So where are you in the process?
We have just started recording the video this week. So obviously I've been working on it for over a year now, and we're finally starting to move the pieces. So I've been model making up until this point.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
So.
Well, looking forward to it. You straddle a few industries, as I mentioned in your bio there, preamble, if you will, opera, dance, theater, film, to name a few. From your point of view as a designer, who happens to also be a woman, who has given what social strides have been made this past year, and and you have a degree of mindfulness to your work, I think, and you, as you just said earlier about Lenape and seeing how we can properly move forward and paying honor to them. There's a big concerted media effort for your smirk. Just answer the question before I think you need to finish it. There's a concerted effort by the media who sign big paychecks for industries to make efforts towards diversity and on creative teams and, dare I say, equality, which I think that word doesn't exist. I think equality is something that it's a utopian word that it's great to strive for. It's going to be always a teeter-totter, I feel, and it is a balance, right? So do you feel that that the industry that you're working in, I know you're coming back into it now, I know it's not full force yet, but you obviously have friends and colleagues who are film productions beginning again. Do you see strides being made, concerted effort out there towards diversity on your creative teams?
I actually do. I see effort. I definitely see people trying. One of the things I've been watching is my partner has been in Yale, and they have a whole class on race. Whether or not it's effective, I can't speak to, but people are trying to figure out how to talk to each other and where and when to start cultivating artists of all different races and ethnicities. So there's definitely effort. I would say, it's tricky. It's never enough, and it's gonna, even when it's like equal, it will never be equal till we don't have to think about it anymore, and that's so far away. I don't know if that was a great answer, but
it's an honest answer.
What I've seen, yeah.
And I don't know, because as someone who runs arts organizations, I'm very cognizant of an equal playing field as much as I can. And I hope, to me, it's to borrow a quote from an old Jane's Addiction song, "No talking and all action." It's like you just want to put it out there, and I hope we walk the walk. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Our podcast has the colors of the rainbow and the colors of different industries and age and gender. And obviously, we can only do one at a time. And I think there can always be an effort towards more diversity. But I think we're showing that effort, and I think that young people are cognizant of it, and that to me, the art always comes first, and it's what we're talking about now. but I think we have to hopefully hold the door open and be a little more smarter about, and I guess the word's not smart, being a little more aware maybe.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's true. I mean, think about why you're not taking a person seriously, or why this is, are you just culturally trained? You know, it's like how we think about like French art as like the creme de la creme, right? Or, you know, like the Greek statues versus we've been trained. We've been almost shoved down your throat that this is what, you know, so, but is what's over here just as beautiful? You just haven't been trained to look at. And it's the same when you're dealing with people, I think. Yeah. I don't know.
So you're going to be finishing up this project soon, knock on wood. And what has it taught you, and will it, you incorporate like this kind of style in more of your work in the future? Or are you kind of like, okay, this was a specific thing, I'm done with it, I need space, and I want to move on to other pastures?
I think I'll incorporate pieces of it. Can you rephrase? Can you ask one more time? Yes, I'll definitely use pieces of it. I don't like repeating. I like to try different things. So yeah, I mean, there's one. It's taught me a lot of stuff. It's also helped me dive deeper into other artists. And one person I became aware of was Karel Zeman. I think that's how you say his last name. He's a Polish film designer from the 1960s, and he would take mats, kind of like what I'm already doing, but like it'd be a lake, and he would use the mat in front of the camera to make it look like you're in a cave, right? Like he would it's basically what we can do digitally now, but it's way more interesting for me to fool the eye in that way. So I've been wondering if maybe that's the next thing I'll try playing around with. Cool. Something like that.
Yeah. Well, I just, to rephrase as you asked, in a way, I'm just curious, like, what pieces you found helpful to move forward? Like, do you want to keep making small films? Do you want to? What you said is perfectly acceptable, by the way. But do you want to, not be in charge anymore of like being being more? I would rather be part of a team than being the one calling the shots and being the one, overseeing the entire experience. And so I'm just curious in different ways how, through this process, what you want to take with you, and perhaps like anything, going back to what you said earlier about, I'm sure you had multiple dreams through what you're doing. Anything other projects that fascinated you?
Yeah, no, I actually love being in charge of the whole aesthetic. And I do love working on a team, don't get me wrong. I think that this fits in perfectly, as hopefully I can, if I'd love to be a production designer someday, obviously. Maybe not obviously, but
now.
Everybody knows now.
It's obvious now, folks.
I've been hiding it for years. But this, I think, is really great for helping develop my own personal aesthetic while I'm developing, working with a larger team, et cetera, et cetera. And as far as further projects, I do want to keep, specifically to stop motion, I want to keep working with it. I love it. The next thing that I have been dreaming about, the other thing that I had thought about starting was a project about my grandma's house, like creating a facade. And I have this recording of her when she was sick, right before she passed away in the hospital, and she was talking about like one of their first apartments, and it's just several different topics. But like, what is it? What happens when you match that recording? And I don't know yet, but I just have this idea to use that recording in the facade of her house and see what starts to come out of that.
See, I knew there was something.
Sometimes you gotta keep going for it.
Well, yeah. I just like to ask. I just think I think there's because I feel that I'm that way. Like, you end up thinking of things, and you, like the podcast, for instance, is a perfect example of this. Like, I had this idea about 5 years ago, and then it came up about 2 years ago again, because it wasn't right. The idea wasn't quite ready yet of what we wanted to do. When we had the first film festival ever, I wanted to do like these little like focus, like kind of like Humans of New York, but like Artists of Inwood, kind of like really fast, small little snips. And I was like, well, that's cool, but it kind of seems a little. A, it was kind of a takeoff of Humans in New York a little bit. And B, I was like, you really don't get to know anybody. It's just kind of like, oh, that's kind of nice. And you like, it's like watching advertising. You see the first 2 seconds and you're gone to something else. So I thought this idea came around, and like I got a team together on December 2019. back then, and oh boy,
Such a younger
and
time.
so young then, so many ideas, and this came around at the right time, and it's really been, other than the short films every week we've been doing throughout the pandemic, this has been a linchpin for us that I think has been positive. So thank you for being a part of it.
No, thank you for having me. It's
Sure
great.
thing. So, Libby, where can we can send people to find out more about your work?
Oh, I have a website. It's Libby.Stadstad it's just Libby.Stadstad.com.
We'll get the right one up, I
We'll get
promise.
it.
Okay,
Thank
we'll put
you.
that as part of the episode page,
Yeah.
and people will be able to keep track of your upcoming projects and where the rivers meet from there. And of course, Inwood Art Works will have her film up on our page at some point when we can do that. So thank you again for taking the time to being here today. It's wonderful to have you. Is there anything else you have to say while you're here?
No, just thanks for having me, and I'm excited.
I'm excited to have you. We're excited for your film. So thanks again to Libby Stadstad for joining me on this Artist Spotlight episode of Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. That really does help. Many thanks to our good friends here at 809 Restaurant and Lounge for hosting us at 112 Dyckman Street here in Inwood, NYC, and to hidesites.com for local uptown promotional support. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inwood Art Works to keep up with all that we do, including the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, pop-up galleries, live performances, and so much more. You can support On Air and all of our programming by making a tax-deductible donation at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. This program is supported in part by New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with City Council, and in part by a grant from NYC and Company Foundation with partial support from Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Art Works On Air.